Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Conspiracy Theory Fun Show. You can call me Mr. CTF, my wife, Mrs. CTF. Today, we're going to be talking about the clauses, Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus, the workshop, and the forces that have propelled them to become pretty much an essential part of our culture at this point. Those are motivational forces that come either from the God world that has created the world of man and nature, if you believe that, and God, the unseen forces, Allah, that's great. Or the motivational forces from the perspective of man in the middle, So if you're just like me and just kind of negotiating between the two sides as best you can, that's great. Or from the scientific, natural world, world of evolution, motivational forces there, and those forces have created humankind, and we have a social contract that has created God, social construct. Sorry. So, in either case, you have those three distinct worlds, and whether they're real or not, all three exist. So that's my acceptance of that. And then going from there, just explaining Santa Claus through those three cases and how Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus do their trick of lining up those three worlds pretty well. It doesn't always line up pretty well. Some cases, the evolutionary world and the world of God line up, like gay rights, for instance. They both tamp down on gay rights, and then it's up to man in the middle saying, hey, we've got this. Fitness isn't really that important anymore with 7 billion people on Earth, It doesn't really matter. Even if half the population was gay, it just really wouldn't matter at this point. So, as far as conspiracy theories go, a lot of people throwing shade on conspiracy theorists. A lot of those conspiracy theorists are just changing facts, so they're actually conspiracy factists. But also, science is basically one big conspiracy theory that happens to be true and makes our lives better. So, for instance, like round Earth theory is actually the conspiracy theory. Lets us build cool stuff like rockets. Apparently, there's planets that we can go visit with those cool rockets. And then also, sometimes you hear from science a theory that actually is not true. Like, for instance, the word ecosystem just doesn't make any sense, a belief in a higher order. Basically, it's like a backdoor belief in God. And if you believe in evolution as the main driving force of the natural world, then you really can't believe in the ecosystem, It just doesn't make any sense. You could have evolutionary balance points, for instance, but the ecosystem is basically a projection of mankind. It does make it easier and it's functional, but it's a projection. So, and as far as my motive forces go, a little over a year ago on Christmas, basically, my sister killed herself. She had 3 children and a husband, and they're all loving and they're doing okay today. But that was pretty sad. She had a lot of advantages, and she kind of went to university. From my perspective, she was pretty much okay there, and then she just got very confused after that experience. This is in California, of course, and if you look at the U.S., I think a lot of people are confused now in the U.S., and so those forces just added up, and over time, even though she was probably a better person than me, and I'm pretty crazy, but I keep a lot of forces balanced, so I'm not really insane. She basically drove herself insane. And so I'm going to be tamping down on those sort of forces. And the reason why I'm starting with the clauses is because that's the day she died. And that was my dad's last Christmas. And it's pretty sad for him. He was going to pass away from old age and cancer and stuff like that anyways. But that as the last Christmas is pretty sad. So moving on for the clauses from the God, Allah perspective, you got to do a meta-analysis of God. What does Allah mean? What does God mean? What is that about? And just to give perspective, God is one letter away from good in English, and also Allah is pretty close to the word all, as in like all-powerful force and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And then we look at God, and what is he trying to do? He's trying to make our lives better, I guess. I'm projecting when I say he, but you can say she or it or whatever. I just say he. And And then the God forces are doing that. They're coming down sometimes. They're trying to help us out, I guess. And they're the typical thing has been God communicating with like a prophet or some representative, like Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. And there's difficulty there because the God forces are so powerful. Moses gets sequestered. The bush catches on fire. Muhammad gets taken out on a Pegasus with wings on its feet. Often, Jesus comes down and gets killed. Basically, it's like Nom down here on Earth at that point. And then, typically the God strategy has been, God's got an idea. He's going to send down instruction manuals, get a person in contract in their lifetime. In the case of Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha too. And even Buddha has to sit there and meditate for like hours before getting communications from the God forces. So, it just doesn't work that well. Even though it's been really successful, it's a hard process. And, our lives are a lot better than they were like 10,000 years ago or whenever anything started, if you believe in the God sort of belief system of stuff. So, but I think what the clauses represent is a new strategy from God, is that the clauses started like 1,500 years ago. They didn't get in contract in their lifetime, obviously, from God. But after they died, probably like a couple hundred years later, God saw the clauses, what they'd started. They gave dowries to women so they didn't have to become prostitutes. Pretty good stuff. And then just the whole idea of like paying it forward and just doing those simple things and making it kind of fun pretty much took off. And God saw that and said, this is what I want. The essential teachings of the clauses are basically be good for goodness sake. And if you think about it from the God forces perspective, that's really what they want. They don't want to be having people up there just because they're the authority figure. That doesn't really do them that much good. As soon as you take a nap, someone else can usurp your authority. So being good for goodness sake is really the essential part of, if you do the meta-analysis of religions, that God is going for, and then hoping that will help humanity become obviously gooder. You have that central piece of circular logic, which is really pretty cool, that the clauses have made from down here on Earth. So it's kind of a rags to riches story, with God then giving them, getting them in contract after they're up in heaven and stuff like that, and making them more and more powerful over time. Basically, they're becoming G'd up, or they've gotten a lot of ecclesiastical upgrades over the years, and now they're just like, from the God perspective, super probably his most powerful representative. That covers one motive force, is a connection to mankind. And what is the ground, or what does God already provide the clauses to as far as connecting mankind? This gets pretty intense. If you look at where the clauses came in, like 1,500 years ago, after Jesus, before Muhammad, and then underneath the Abrahamic religion group umbrella, it's pretty, and that umbrella group has a lot of connections to, if you just think of, Muhammad brought in the Arabs to the Abrahamic religion group umbrella. Though that reach goes to Indonesia, through Persia, also in India, and then to Africa. A lot of people brought into the Abrahamic religion group umbrella from Muhammad, and then Jesus obviously as well with Christianity, and people, Africa is brought into the Abrahamic group umbrella again with Christianity. Northern Europe is obviously the Roman Empire. And then you have, South America, North America brought into the Abrahamic religion group idea. Jesus is an interesting character himself. He went to India for like 14 years or 12 years, says the internet. I don't know anymore. And that means that he picked up some Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and integrated that into Christianity. So that's a pretty powerful integration. Buddhism was really big also in Japan, China, stuff like that. And then also, if you think about other versions of Abrahamic ideals. You have Karl Marx. He's a German Jew. Kind of both have become Abrahamic, and new combination there. You get communism. Communism goes over to Eastern Europe and everything, and into China, and so that's pretty much Abrahamic connection there. And if you think about the Clausian miracle, which is the basically the world's one functioning miracle, or one of the world's functioning miracles, is you have communism and capitalism, two sides of the Abrahamic religion group that are kind of facing off with each other a lot, but they trade and they do positive stuff, peaceful stuff, and they work together. And China has become the Earth's version of Santa Claus's workshop. Probably as the Clauses are looking at retirement in the next coming centuries, from the God perspective. So that's pretty cool. If that's not enough connections from the Clausian perspective as far as Clausian Awesomeness Theory goes, pretty much the Christmas holiday also integrates a lot of pagan stuff. You got the tree coming into the house. You have a lot of animal connections too, very tribal sort of stuff. You have the Advents, and then you have the whole thing with Jesus' birthday landing on the Sunday, which is kind of the day where people see the sun first coming back to Earth. So that's an important connection to the tribal stuff. And then even getting further into the connections to the Clauses are basically would be the funnest people to hang out with, and it's pretty much the case that Mr. Claus drinks beer, and so that ties in pretty nicely to the neon churches. If you're out there in a bar or stuff like that, that's basically the neon church with the jukebox choir idea. As far as clauses looking like this or that for certain people, I think the clauses draw and take advantage of the idea from Christ is that if you look in Africa, like they make him black, in Asia he's Asian, in the different parts of the world, it basically assumes the identity of the people there. And that just makes things easier, and I would say that's the chameleon Christ idea. And then Muhammad does that too, obviously, with not allowing pictures to be drawn of him, even though people name themselves after him, which is kind of like a human picture. But, so clauses draw from that too, as far as blending in and connecting to different people. You just imagine the Clausian idea as whatever you want as far as ethnicity goes or whatever. But if you say he's white, I'll take advantage of that because clauses are positive, so that's cool for me. So then as far as more connectedness goes, of course, the clause is also connected to the animal kingdom. If you're like an environmentalist, he's got reindeer teams, polar bear guards, stuff like that. And if you think about it from the God perspective, the whole marine forces and a lot of birds go up to the North Pole every year. They're probably going up there for orders, and then God just is like throwing down some food for the clauses and those animals so they can get orders and tie into the intelligence network that Mrs. Clauses runs. Pretty much the most powerful intelligence network of all time. So that covers a lot of different connections and kind of the rags to riches story of the clauses as far as being G'd up. Another capital motive force for God, or capital move for God, is the putting the focus on Jesus' birthday. I don't believe that Jesus was the Son of God or died on the cross. That's not the important thing. So a lot of people do believe that. I don't. I don't think the evidence shows that, and I don't think the scripture shows that. I read the Bible at some point when I was like 8 years old. This is kind of what got this whole thing started. And then saying, okay, you said some really interesting, positive stuff, but then looking around at the Christmas miracle, I said, what is this? This is almost a hidden religion. So that's how this theory got created. But I don't think it matters, like you have this dude who was positive and he died, and it's a shame, and so as an apology, I think God forces them, just said, we got to celebrate this guy's birthday. The Christian churches, if you think about them, are kind of focused on death, and it's kind of, when you go into a church, it's kind of scary to a person like me, is that it's like a death scene. And so I think that moving the clauses up from their own day of December 6th and bumping them up to Jesus' birthday is a big hint from God that things should be focused more on pro-life stuff as opposed to focusing on death. Then you have the next mode from God. Speaking about death, is that when you do the meta-analysis of religions, there's like this heaven and hell concept, and everything that's going on there, it's very unclear, even within the same religion. It's kind of unclear. It's just a messy thing. And probably what was going on is that it was made at the time by the God forces or whatever, and it's a pretty simple concept but very unclear. And as human beings are getting more and more bigger and more numbers and stuff like that, the God force probably would have needed to replace that at some point. And then the clauses were saying, hey, we need a workshop. And so God just cleverly, since God and the law are very clever folks too, then they would have said, okay, we'll just combine the two, make the workshop universal heaven and hell. And just from a perspective, just everybody goes to the same place, so that's easier. Mrs. Claus is keeping track of everything as far as the intelligence gathering goes, who's good and who's bad and stuff like that, and where they should go then in the workshop. If you're a good soul, obviously it's iced out, it's pretty awesome. And you make children's toys, and so that's making smiles on children's faces, so that's pretty cool. If you're a bad soul, then obviously you go there making children's toys. At first doesn't seem that nice and seems like hell, but then it repairs your soul over time, and then you can get reincarnated or interjected down to earth for testing, and then you can go back up to the workshop with no restrictions. Like, it's got a pretty iced out amusement park, and restaurants are obviously much better there than here on earth, so that's pretty cool. And also the old school heaven and hell, just like compared to how life is today here on earth, just wasn't really competing. No one really knew what to do up there. No one really knows what to do. And then like the old school heaven and hell is also not in line with the Constitution. No cruel and unusual punishment. Probably not in line with like OSHA standards too. Probably and the new school heaven and hell is also with communism, not in line with communism as far as equality of outcome. The new school heaven and hell is not in line with the Islamic doctrine of mercy. The new school heaven and hell is so just a lot better. And then also capitalism, it just has a return on investment for God. It just makes a lot more sense as far as using resources. And then also more in line with environmentalism. The fires of hell would have it just is a lot of carbon to use, and if we're decarbonizing here on Earth, then it's pretty much the case that God would have thought that first. Just like if the Constitution wasn't in line with God as far as stuff goes, one nation under God, then the U.S. would have been crushed by now. As it is, the U.S. is still standing, so that's pretty cool. Then just thinking about other things, like if someone wants to replace the clauses as far as, like say the Pope is saying, hey, we got to tamp down the clauses, they're too powerful, they're not in line with our religions. Like, I think that's a very positive exercise. Go ahead, you'd have to get everybody together as far as getting all the religions and government leaders together in the whole world, and then replace it with something better, and that would be like a pretty cool thing. So I encourage that, go ahead and try. I'd like to see something better, moving on to just the man-in-the-middle perspective. I have 3 children, I'm a dad, it's pretty cool, and having the clauses and the whole idea of Christmas and the holiday is a pretty good holiday. It gets smiles on their faces, and plus it teaches them some just basic good morale, be good for goodness sake. And so it just works. That's like a Jack and Jill approach, or like it just works for the Jack and Jill and the family and stuff like that. And then you see what other people are doing, you just say, I'm going to do that too. So that's kind of like the Jones effect. And then you just couple that with like a nominal growth rate of 2%, over 1,500 years ago. If they started out with like one house, or if it started out with one house 1,500 years ago, and just rolled that forward over 1,500 years, it basically explains why for a lot of people compared to 1,500 years ago, it's like Christmas every day now at this point on Earth. So that's pretty cool. moving on to like the evolutionary side of things, we're saying then that the whole God idea is then just basically a big social construct that we as evolved mammals have come up with, and then to help our evolution. And then, social constructs, I think, are really important. If you think of one social construct that everybody uses, is basically the days of the week. Monday, Tuesday, they're not real, but they exist. And that's the same thing as the clauses. They're not real, but they exist. So that's pretty cool. And then putting the social construct of the clauses in its proper place will help us see how the motive forces of nature or evolutionary forces line up with it. The clauses are basically the flagship social construct of the flagship holiday, that's Christmas, of the flagship civilization, that is then the Abrahamic civilization, which basically covers most of the world at this point. Of the flagship species, that's us humans, of the flagship animal group, that's mammals, of the flagship planet, that's planet Earth, in the flagship solar system, in this part of the galaxy. So pretty much a lot of flagships there, and flagships mean like kind of responsibility as far as leadership goes. And I think the most important part or the best jumping off point here as far as the flagships and what they mean is if you just look at the mammalian animal group or the mammalian argument or the mammalian agenda, what does it mean to be a mammal? And basically the solution that mammals have come up with is basically nurture. Nurture is the solution that mammals have for unlocking success from nature. And if you look at like what the clauses kind of represent as far as evolution goes, freedom of movement, paying it forward, taking care of each other as far as community, having fun and play, and taking care of your children, and then being a good person for goodness sake. That's kind of the human flagship on the mammalian agenda. And if you think about nurture, it's kind of associated with like femininity, and that's because mammals are basically a feminine argument. Nature being traditionally more the animal or male side of things. Even the mammalian animal group is basically named after tits. Mammary glands. So just a hint there where things fit in as far as evolution goes. We're basically a feminine species in a feminine animal group. And I'm a manly guy. Like I have chainsaws, I shoot things. I'm not afraid to do what needs to be done as far as serve to survive sort of thing. But we are part of the mammalian animal group, which basically means tits. So that's really cool. And then as far as like things go and tying into things, I think there's different aspects that kind of tie them together. The clauses tie all three worlds together pretty well. And if you think about someone like Elon Musk, for instance, this is YouTube, you gotta mention Elon Musk. He's pretty much the mammalian group leader at this point, as far as here down on Earth. He's basically taking the mammals and saying, hey, we gotta think of the future and getting ready to go to another planet. And if you think about that from like a biblical sort of point of view too, he's basically a new Noah. He's making the same Noah's Arks arguments that Noah made, and if someone's going to get a dog on Mars, it's probably going to be Elon Musk. So that's like as far as helping all animals out, having a second planet would be pretty cool. And then just from like the man in the middle perspective too, if you think about Elon Musk, just building rockets is cool. It just is something fun for the kids to look at, and it has all sorts of technical things. It's just fun. So and then also if you think about applying Clausian Awesomeness Theory, if you think about Musk too, he's basically must have been like the worst person ever in a previous life. And then he got sent up to the workshop, had to make all the toys like blindfolded, got like put on a suit detail, sleigh detail, like probably rose to be like chief, or really got advice from Mrs. Claus. and then got re-injected down to Earth through reincarnation, and now is just like the awesome person. If you're applying Clausian Awesomeness Theory and the God perspective there. And basically now I've kind of run out of things to talk about. I could talk about this for hours, but I don't want to bore you or anything. If you like what I'm doing, you can send something to my wife. It's kind of hard being married to a conspiracy theorist, but it's pretty cool, honestly. And also, if you don't like what I'm doing, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be positive, and I hope we can work something out in the future. And then also, I go for walks when I don't like things and think about things, so that works for me. And then also, if you don't like what I'm doing, just know this, that I pretty much still have to pay my taxes, so I'm going to be doing that after I make this video. And then just have a good day and stay positive, obviously. And Merry Christmas for 2022, by the way.